Hi, and welcome to the Darkside with me, Pastor Tabitha, and him, the coming storm. We are live every Sunday with our show, The Darkside. We've decided to do a slightly different show than we normally do because what we were doing is we were doing the dark side of certain topics and we were maybe promoting it. Whereas now we will still do topics and we will still look at it, but the dark side is the show. And so when you come to us on this space and we're doing the dark side, welcome. What you can expect is topical discussions on religion, politics, social justice, race, gender. I mean, I don't really think there's anything out of limits, is there? Is there anything off limits? No. Just our conversations. So I'm a little late, so I must publicly apologise for being a little late this evening, otherwise known as a lot late, because you'll see it says 9 till 10 on the flyer, and it's now going up to 10 and we're only just starting. Clearly, I need to change the flyer. My aim is to be here at 9. Next week, I will be on time. I will be on time. I'm sorry. The biggest apology, of course, to the coming storm. Welcome. Hello. So, are you ready for today?
Mm-hmm.
He was half an hour ago. So today we're going to do a conversation surrounding what we've missed. We've been on vacation. Not really. We've just had a break from the internet. Hi to everyone who's joined us. We see you. We're really glad that you're with us this evening. Please post your comments. We can see them. We love to interact with you. If you have questions, if there's a topic that you want us to cover, please pop that in. If you have a question about what we're doing, please put that into the comment section. We will try and get to everyone's comments. So thank you for joining us this evening. This evening, we're going to go through January. That's our big thing, right? We're going to talk about what's happened in the last month that we haven't been broadcasting.
Yeah.
What do you want to kick off with? There's so much. I feel like there's a lot to talk about in January, not just my birthday.
Yeah, there's many things. One thing perhaps to kick off with is Elon Musk becoming the richest person in the world. So I don't know if you want to give your input into that or your views.
My views on a rich person getting richer. Or it being Elon Musk, which one? Because I find it quite, at that level of wealth, how much have you stolen from humans in order to get that wealthy? That's my question.
There is that. I was thinking more in lines with the fact that so many people are suffering, and yet you've managed to add how many more billions to your wealth.
So it's surprising, right? Isn't it shocking?
So that's a general question of wealth. And then the other question is, you know, who wants a crazy person being that wealthy?
His mental health is being called into question. But does he have documented mental health issues?
I honestly don't know, but some of the things that he comes out with, you're like, if you were sat on a train next to a person who struck up a conversation with you, and some of those things left their mouth, you'd be off at the next stop.
I don't know. I've sat on some crazy trains. I'm from London. I don't know. We just kind of turn a blind eye and move on.
Yeah. You see? Well, that says more about the mental health of Londoners then.
Be nice. Well, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this one because should somebody who has mental health issues not accumulate wealth? I mean, what are we trying to say?
No, it's not a question of them accumulating wealth. It's what they can do with the wealth when they're that crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel torn. I feel torn.
I'll give you an example.
Okay, go on then.
Whether he's actually wealthy or not, it's portrayed as though he is. And look what Donald Trump managed to do with his wealth.
Okay. Yeah, well.
So it's not a question. It's not a question of should people with mental health issues accumulate wealth. But listen, mental health has nothing to do with your intelligence or anything like that. And mental health is also, you can't just say it's a one size fits all when you say mental health.
No. Very broad spectrum.
So it calls into question, and that whole thing. So when it's not a question of per se you have mental health issues, you shouldn't accumulate wealth. It's what can you do with that wealth?
Yeah, this is a. I mean, I think to me the bigger part of the story that I find frustrating, and maybe it's because I don't know. Like, I don't follow Elon Musk's story, to be honest. I'm not really about the uber rich. I don't follow it, other than to say that if you have uber rich people at this point in history, it feels to me it's at the expense of the people. Well, it always has been at the expense of the people. But what we have now is that we look back on history and we're like, oh, these terrible rich kings who stole from the people. Look at them. We glorify Robin Hood's story, and we glorify Aladdin's story. And we glorify these stories of the underdog who frees the wealth of the rich and distributes wealth to the poor and does all of these things. And in reality, I find it kind of interesting that in the 21st century, millions of children will die of poverty. That is actually the reason they die, is of poverty. And what does that mean, to die of poverty, when there are people who have that much wealth? But we're not championing redistributing wealth from people who have so much money they will never spend it in their lifetime. It's not possible. And neither will their children or their children's children. In fact, the last Amazon boss he managed to split it all in half and still have billions. His wife is giving it away and she still has more. So I have a bigger challenge with the clear mental disconnect we have in the 21st century to do with wealth distribution. Should wealth be accumulated in one place and the rest of the people be fighting for scraps, and that be seen as okay? Because that's in effect what we're saying. It's okay to fight for scraps.
Well, for me, this is my perspective on that whole question, and it stems back to the Cold War. And the USA won the Cold War, but the rest of the world were the victim.
Okay.
And that's not necessarily that I agree with communism, but it's the idea that stems out of the US of capitalism and all forms of any social responsibility are negative.
Yeah.
And that you can trace directly to, or the decline of social responsibility to the US winning the Cold War.
I never thought about that, actually. I never thought about that. That's a good point you bring up there. I have to think on that now. I have to hold that in my mind and chew that one over. I mean, I do definitely think that, capitalism, I can't say it today, but capitalism, she says, trying her best, is not the answer. It is not the answer to give businesses power. It's not the answer to allow people to accumulate millions on the back of their workers. Now, let's bear in mind that most of these people who are accumulating wealth are doing it at the expense of people. So, you don't go to work for a billionaire and earn a fair wage often. You don't get paid in line with the amount of hard work you're doing. You're not paid a wage that actually reflects the effort that you put in. In fact, a lot of times they own, if you're at that end of clever, let's put it like that, or innovative, that's a better way of putting it. If you're innovative, they own the copyrights to your thoughts. They own the copyrights to your innovation. So they're not just making money, they're actually stealing money, because you should be able to make money from your innovations, but you can't, because you work for this company and the company owns it. And that's seen as okay. That's seen as normal and acceptable. And, for me, I have challenges with that. I really have absolute challenges with the idea that this is something that I should aspire to. I should aspire to be like these people who steal effectively from people. No, I don't want to. I don't want to be like that.
I think one of the issues here is that it typically takes money to make money. So if you have an idea and you want to bring it to market, it typically takes money to research, prototype, marketing, all the rest of these things. And many people don't have access to the finance. And when you start looking at racial aspects that play into that banks don't lend money to people, especially Black people. And when they do, it's at a higher interest rate. And you start looking at all of these aspects, then it becomes even harder. So yes, there's a lot of unethical practices that are taking part in this, which is why I think, and this is just my views on it, I've been doing some reading into cryptocurrencies and things lately, and I think cryptocurrencies have the real potential to subvert that model.
Okay.
Because as people begin to trade in cryptocurrency, if you get on the ground level, now it's a highly volatile market, but if you get in at the ground level of some of these cryptocurrencies and they go on to do well, you get to build up your wealth, in a way outside of the traditional market, but it's a highly volatile thing. And you have to be able to have the ability to get your hands on a seed sum to start that investment and be able to say, I can just let this go. But especially during the pandemic, with so many people living below the breadline, we're not even saying at the breadline.
Below poverty line is a real issue. Yeah.
It's harder, but it does still have the ability just to open up a few, the gateway just to a few more people to be able to build up the capital. To do that. So I think cryptocurrencies are interesting in the idea that they have the ability to subvert the current market.
Yeah, but I think for me, it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? You just put a different set of people into a powerful position. And if they haven't learned the lessons of wealth, if they haven't learned the lessons of fair pay, if they don't understand the principles behind social care, if they don't understand that healthcare should be something that everyone should be allowed access, clean water should be available to people, you will continue the cycle. And I don't think at this point in history I'm comfortable with the fact that people know that. I don't think people actually know.
That's not the question I was speaking to, though.
No, but I mean, my point is, you'll subvert the market, but it's just a new set of people, same rules.
Yes, to some degree, but yes, to some degree that's true. But the hope is that new people will bring a new ethos.
Yeah.
Currently, you just have the same people. We're talking about generational people moving in.
Yes, yes, there are generational wealth issues, etc. Of course.
For example, and people that don't follow politics, a lot of people won't know this. So, for example, we'll take U.S. politics. Mitt Romney, one of the Republican senators who has been opposed to Trump from the start, right? Republican senator. His family have been in politics going back generations. But then the chairperson of the Republican Party who support Trump, her name is Ronna McDaniel.
Okay.
Her full name is Ronna Mitney McDaniel.
Oh, cousins.
Exactly.
Sisters.
I couldn't work out if they were cousins or actually siblings. They're either first cousins or siblings.
Wow.
Right? So what you have, as I said, what you have now is effectively that family is hedging their bets. Either way it goes.
We got one on this side and one on that side. Should it go this way? We all get shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. We go this way, shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. It's quite interesting. Does this then bring us on to another point of the news, though, I wonder?
Yeah, it is a decent segue into another part. But before we move into another segment, I'm just going to say, whichever way the wind blows, that family is going to remain in power.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because
so you will never have new blood at the top. So my point is simply that with people, as if you have new people that are able to gain wealth, they will be able to exert influence.
Okay, so then I still have questions as to whether that works or doesn't work, but because I see that the indoctrination of us as poor people, regular folk, however you want to say it, is to look up and aspire to be them, regardless of whether we stand against them. In the end, we're still trying to do exactly the same behavior because we're trying to accumulate wealth, keep wealth, pass it on generationally to the next generation. We're taught that those things are. So, for example, conversations in different communities when they're asked, why is house buying so important to some communities and not other communities? Why are you not accumulating wealth? Well, where does that question come from? Why do we ask that question? Because actually, most people don't own their homes. They have a mortgage. They owe debt. The house is on temporary loan to you as long as you repay your debts. And quite frankly, that's being called into question every day, especially during this prolonged period of corona where jobs are on offer. So this idea that somehow you're better off if you own your home, but you don't own your home until the final payment's made. And some people don't make that final payment. So why is that seen as better? Why is debt in and of itself seen as the better option? I have X amount of hundreds of thousands worth of debt above my name, seen as a better option than I have no debt, but I'm paying my rent every month. Why is that seen as a better option?
Right. And I would simply say this. Listen, I agree with you that the systems need to change. But I think people don't necessarily aspire to these people. I think what they aspire to is the idea that they don't have to struggle. And the people that they don't see struggling are your Elon Musks, are your Jeff Bezos, are your Bill Gates, are these people. And so you go to the extremes. You talk to people that have been through famine, or they've done studies on poor people, and it's typically famine feast.
Okay, yeah.
Scenario. So when you see people struggling, and they're like, I don't want to struggle anymore. Who's not struggling? You look at that, and then they're not struggling.
Yeah, so, here in Holland, buying a house is considered an investment. Each payment, the house becomes a bit more your own.
Yes, that is true. The house does become your own somewhat. So I'm pretty sure, because I know in quite a few countries, and I'm pretty sure the Netherlands won't be exempt to this, that for certain circumstances or under certain circumstances, the government can make a compulsory purchase. I know those sort of regulations exist in the UK. I know they exist in the States. I know they exist in Bermuda. I know they exist everywhere. So this concept that you own it when somebody can forcibly remove you from it is actually a mirage.
Yeah. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think they have similar laws here.
So on a surface level, I agree. It can be an investment.
Yeah.
But, as I said, the fact that you can be forcibly removed from it means actually you don't actually own it. It's not actually yours to do with as you will. And the other thing is, under these compulsory purchase schemes, they will offer you what they regard as market value, not necessarily the true value of the property.
So you're left in debt, not only.
Yes.
Yeah, so the tricky part is with taxes, because most people will not pay off their mortgage because it's better for your taxes. So in the Netherlands they have this. It's just amazing. The tax system here, and then do you know what? Let's not do that. If I get into tax system here in the Netherlands, I might die. But yes, in the Netherlands you never pay off your mortgage apparently, because if you pay off your mortgage, then the tax man is right on you for so always have a little bit of mortgage to pay, just a little bit. So that you get the tax rebate, because once your mortgage is gone, they're going to get you, and then that house is no longer yours in the way that you thought it was. You are not free, You're not living debt-free anymore. There will be debts of different kinds called Belastingdienst. Anyway, I try and be polite about it. To me, it's just a frustration. I'm an outsider. I'm sorry, people. It's frustrating for me if you're from the Netherlands. Sorry. I know that Dutch people find it frustrating, but as an outsider, I find it very frustrating. It's just me.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking about wealth now, I guess some of the things that we could talk about in January have been wealth-related issues, I guess. Wealthy. Mm-hmm. But, here's a point. So here's something you said which really struck me as quite interesting. People look up at who is not struggling. And then I think, when I look at Elon Musk, he's clearly struggling. When I think of Jeff Bezos, clearly struggling. When I think of people like Donald Trump, clearly struggling. I don't see these people as free, happy agents. I see them as people who are clearly struggling. So I find that quite interesting, that even when we see the character of these people, and a lot of them are quite dodgy, let's be honest. I've not mentioned any names that anyone's going to be happy to be like this person. You think, who's not struggling? Oh, this group of people. But when you look at the group of people collectively, and you actually begin to break down some of these individuals, I wouldn't wish them on my worst enemy. I mean, they're not exactly. I mean, we started off saying that they're a little bit crazy, right?
Yeah, as I said, I don't think any of those people that you have mentioned are particularly sane. Yeah, so, but as I said, one thing they're not doing is struggling to feed themselves.
I know, Biggie said it, man. More money, more problems. I'm just...
Listen, that's the reality, but you're not struggling to feed yourself. Now, here's the thing.
Okay. No, that's a fair point.
Once you've got a roof over your head and your bills are paid and all the rest of that, everything else, or most other things, they'll fall into place. So I think that's the aspect. But we're meant to segue into another conversation besides
besides rich crazy people.
Yeah.
So let's talk about another rich crazy person who incited a riot on the 6th. I mean, what on earth? It's not even a riot. What did he incite? Insurrection. I mean, he's walking around. This is actually what I find. And again, this is about wealth and power, because who on a local level, let me even put it like this. When poor people tried to do that in the UK in the Guy Fawkes era, we made a whole holiday out of burning them at the stake. Like, we just, it's just terrible. How do you get to try and overthrow a democratic, in quotation marks, because it's a republic, not a democracy, but, democracy, let's say that. How do you get to overthrow it because you didn't like the results, and you get to just wander off on a plane paid for by the people? The actual people are paying for this with their taxes, and go live in a nice house that they are paying for, with bodyguards that they are paying for, and like your rent is paid for the rest of your life. These people are like your retirement fund for the rest of your life is paid for by these people. How do you get to do that and just walk off like it's nothing?
Listen, you're absolutely right. In that wealth plays a massive part in this, but I think we also have to acknowledge that race plays a massive part in this as well. And there's a whole conversation about whether you can separate the concept of wealth and class from race. Whole conversation to go on about that, but we need to acknowledge that actually race also plays a major factor in this. One question: what would happen if it was Obama?
Oh, listen, can you imagine? No, let's be real. Let's just take a moment to pause and thank God that we don't act like that, right? Because there would have been dead black people in the street, straight out. Obama, all of them would have been dead. Like, the Secret Service would have turned their guns on him. Like, you could never have stepped out like that, saying any of that stuff. We're going to march down to the Capitol. That's what he said. We're going to... And I'm like, what? We? He was nowhere to be found. So who's this we that was marching anywhere? Number one.
Let me tell you something. First of all, if Obama tried that, let me tell you something. Obama marching alone, because most black people are smart enough to know that we is going to get shot. Right? So it's no we, is you. You were marching down to the Capitol.
You go down. You got a problem that you got voted out? Go. You go deal with your mess.
I'm like,
we told you.
That ain't me. That ain't me.
Oh my gosh, he'd have had a black auntie, a black mama just coming up to him and like, baby, you just need to just take that down. Honey, you lost. Like, let's just walk away. You lost. You're alive. They're gonna pay your mortgage. They're gonna you're gonna get a house. You're gonna get bodyguards. I mean, just walk off into the sunset. Just be happy.
You know, and I think the other telling thing is that, you know, the question was asked on the news media over there, or the question was posed time and time again: what if these were black protesters? They would have been shot. So there's a real acknowledgement, or there's the knowledge that, you know, there's more than one America. There's more than or USA. There's more than one society. And it comes back to the question that Jane Elliott posed to the auditorium: who here is happy to be treated as a black person? And nobody wanted to put their hand up, because you know
that it's wrong, but you're doing nothing about it because it's okay. And why is it okay? Because my privilege is sitting my ass here and I'm not you.
And the other thing that, you know, that I find amusing is that so many people are upset about Ashley Babbitt getting shot in the Capitol and dying.
Is this woman that went down there with all intention of starting a whole insurrection, knowing she's going up against police, breaking into a building, knowing she's being a criminal from day, and you're upset that she died?
You have to remember, she's a veteran, so she took an oath to protect the Constitution, right? So
that same Constitution she was breaking when she was trying to break into the building.
But what I find amusing,
is
that the people that are upset about her dying are the same people that say, well, why didn't Floyd just listen to the police? If he did, he'd still be alive.
Oh, listen. But if she had listened to the police, she would have been at home.
She'd be alive.
And she'd be alive. And I don't think we're trivializing her death. I don't think it's that. Kind of just put that aside for a minute. Any kind of immediate reason you had to switch off and be like, oh my gosh, these people are talking against loss of life, blah, 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 get over yourself. That's not the conversation. The conversation is about disparity. If you're going to sit there and tell me, oh, but Ahmaud Arbery, why did he try to run away from those white people? The white people were just asking him what he was doing. If he had just complied, he'd be alive. Breonna Taylor, I mean, if she had just stayed in her bed a little longer, she'd be, if she just not lived in that neighborhood and associated with those people, then she'd be alive. All of that you want to say. George Floyd, if he had just complied, if he was just compliant, nobody would have had to put a knee on his neck. If he had just but this woman, she didn't have to go down to the Capitol. She didn't have to do any of that. Where's your mouth now? So tell me it's about blue lives. Tell me it's about something other than the fact that you don't care when black people die at the hands of police. Just say that. Let's all just be honest about it. Like, I don't care. That's just say that, because when you're faced with a woman who dies at the hands for the reason that you guys claim is like a legitimate reason, you all are crying over that. You're hurt. And I'm like, well, what are you hurt about? She knew what she was getting into. She, more than anyone, she was a veteran. She knew what she was getting into. She knows what the cost is when you go against your own Capitol building and decide to overthrow the Constitution. You know what the price is you're going to pay. So, anyway, they can't cry about anything because they tried to kill police officers. So as far as I'm concerned, your whole argument is dead. From the time you're trying to kill the police officers that are there, after you have been claiming for 4 years, blue lives, blue lives, blue lives, don't speak on a subject of blue lives. Don't talk about police officers. Don't talk about their lives matter. I've got more interest in police lives mattering than you do.
Yeah. And so yeah,
I rant a bit there.
Yeah, no, it's fine, but it's where you said it's about disparity. I think the real word that we're looking for is dishonesty. You're dishonest in your views or your stated public views about just complying with the police. You're dishonest in your views about police lives mattering. You're just dishonest about everything.
Yeah. For me, that's really frustrating because I think it's much easier to deal with a person who's just like, I just don't like black people. It's really far easier to deal with you than this deceitful middle ground that you want to stand in, this dishonest middle ground. Like, I find, if you just don't like black people, it's fine. Like, you don't have to love everybody. You've been socially conditioned to see black people as a threat and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't, okay. But don't justify that under the terms of Blue Lives Matter. Policing, democracy is important when you're winning, but when you're losing, democracy don't mean nothing to you. So, just vote and it will be okay when you're suppressing votes. So that don't mean nothing to you. But when you lose, suddenly, all of a sudden, you can see all the flaws in the system. And, oh, by the way, this is always my kicker for the whole thing. So Trump is talking about make America great again. They're talking about storming the Capitol because the country has fallen into bad hands, blah, blah, blah. Whose bad hands? He's been running the country for 4 years. Whose bad hands was it in for 4 years?
Don't you know that, listen, you know what?
Anyway.
I don't know, but I bet you if you ask them, they'll tell you Q has an answer for you.
Oh, gosh. All right, so we've moved to Q. Okay, so Q has become a huge issue in Europe. So Q has just been a nightmare everywhere, of course.
It's not just Europe. It's in Australia. It's all over the world.
But I want to bring in Europe now because I think the 6th, we had those lovely incidents in the capital of the USA, which for a lot of Europeans, they got to go like this. Oh, not our country, not our business. Look at you crazy Americans. Look at you. You're so silly. Knowing full well that we're not one step away. And why are we not one step away is because people still in Europe are listening to that stuff, so much so that a recent report from the Dutch media has said that complaints about extremism has gone up 4-fold in the last year because they make a direct link that it's not for what was happening before. They have a special line set up in the Netherlands, which is for extremism watch, so to speak. Help your cousin, friend, brother who's an extremist. And normally what they were trying to stave off is Islamic extremism, of course. That's really the undertone. Well, they've released data that says the numbers have gone up 4-fold, I believe it is. And the reason it's 4-fold is because of white extremism. So they're unexpectedly going, oh, we're so shocked. How could we possibly have white extremism?
Well, to touch back on what I said to you about the Cold War and everyone becoming victims of the US, I don't think we actually realize, in essence, we've all sort of become colonies of the US.
We really have. It's awful.
Financially, they rule, but also culturally. And I think this is one of the things that out of the Cold War, they won a culture war there.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that whatever you see in the US is going to make its way throughout the world.
And so was it 4 or 5 days later we had riots here in the Netherlands? 5. 5 days.
And sometimes, there can be a slight delay between events happening, but you watch, it will gradually make its way throughout the world because the USA won a culture war when they won the Cold War.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's definitely true. And I guess that's why English language has become the lingua franca, is because of that kind of, one of those big reasons as well. Because we buy into the culture of America, movies, TV, all of that media that we consume that's American. All of the social media companies we're using right now are American companies. There is this lingua franca that's kind of proliferated as a result of, I guess, these culture wars in some ways, as a result of the Cold War. But it's become even bigger as a result of that, because you're buying into this narrative that and every time I hear people say, America is the land of the free, I'm like, free for who? Exactly. The people that originally lived there, so not free.
I just want to mention this to you, that I try not to use the word America when referring to the USA.
That's true, because America is bigger than the USA. Absolutely. I'm
But
sorry. But isn't that funny?
But I was about to say, that is one of the results.
That's one of the reasons. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that, and I try to do it sometimes myself, but I forget, because they're like, "Oh, America this, America that," and you're like, "Hold on, no.
It's easier. Yes, it's easier sometimes just to say
USA,
America.
because America encompasses North and South and Canada and all of the whole thing, all of those different parts of that continent. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good point. I've said it twice, I think, now on this, 2 or 3 times. So yes, you're absolutely right. But that's a big cultural part.
Yeah.
So here in the lovely parts of Europe, we see Q raising their ugly head. Q fans, oh joy. Extremism everywhere.
Listen, I am not surprised at any of this. And I think the reason, or part of my reasoning for not being surprised in this, is, as I said, whatever happens in the USA, I expect to see happening throughout the world. But then you have that perfect storm of a pandemic, right? So now people are uncertain of things, and they're looking for answers, no matter how crazy, but they're looking for something they can say, this is sure. Yeah. And then add to that now the financial uncertainty and the debt and the stress that people are entering into.
Yeah.
It's easier for them, and it's been done historically, for them to scapegoat the other. So,
and here there's definitely a scapegoating, that's for sure.
I said, so for me, all of this is not unexpected.
No,
it's not unexpected at all, and it's been coming for a long time. You know, it's not something that has just happened because of what happened in the Capitol, or at the Capitol in Washington. We're talking about Brexit. You know, this has been years in the making. You know, Donald Trump didn't just come into office overnight. That wasn't a surprise thing. That was something that was years in the making.
Well, you've mentioned the big thing, which is, of course, on the 1st of January, Britain finally got their way. Oh, the UK left the EU. They got a divorce bill.
Technically, they left January of last year.
Yeah, technically. But the effects of it were felt the 1st of January this year. Yeah. The final nail was in the coffin, if you want to put it like that. And I think I've been saying for a year, but I should probably go on the record as saying now, please apologize, Britain. Please, 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 please. Just say you're sorry. We're okay with that. I don't mind you saying you're sorry. Just apologize, please. Because we can't keep living with your mess. Like, this Brexit nonsense is just horrendous. Like, every single day since the 1st of January, there has been another horrifying story about how ordinary people, fishers, farmers, factory workers, dock workers, are being decimated. Communities are being decimated by this nonsense. Same people who voted for it, but we're just going to put that aside. Put that aside, because it also affects people like you and I who live. We thought we were in the freedom movement business, and now we had to go for a whole heap of palaver because Britain decided to up and leave, but didn't think about any of their people on the continent.
No, they thought. They just don't care.
Well, tell the truth and shame the... Oh, no, this is my favourite one. They thought... I don't know that they even thought, because what you heard, my favourite one was one of a very famous news radio guy. He was talking, and he said he had this person called up, and they were like, "Oh, it's so awful, Brexit. We need Brexit. These Europeans, da 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 da." So, you know, if they don't stick to it, if they don't stick to what they believe, if they don't leave Europe, I'm just going to go to my home in Spain.
Right. So you're talking about James O'Brien, the callers that call into James O'Brien. Now, that's a funny one, but there's a funnier one than that. There's someone...
Not the one from Spain?
No, because he was in the UK. There was some idiot that called James O'Brien supporting Brexit whilst living in Portugal. He's out of the country.
Oh, but there is a group in Spain that were Brexiteers living in Spain as Brexiteers. I mean, seriously, what is wrong with people?
Yeah, listen. Yeah.
So that's just upsetting. So, okay, so we've had a lot happening in January. So we've had January started with an irony. You enjoyed this. You enjoyed 11 p.m. You enjoyed midnight European time, 11 p.m.
I did.
You really enjoyed it a little bit too much. The delicious irony of it.
I thought it was absolutely fantastic that the British and the Brexiteers were talking about, we're getting control back, we're going to get our sovereignty back. And you know what? You got kicked out of Europe on Europe's time. Yeah?
I shouldn't laugh because I cried. Like, I'm not even going to lie. I'm British. I cried. Like, I was like, don't do this.
I'm like, y'all just made yourselves look dumb and dumber. Whichever way you turn, whatever decision you make, Brexiteers make themselves look dumber.
Especially because when you consider it, the main proponents of Brexit have all applied for citizenship in Europe.
Yeah.
I really wish that the countries would say, no, we don't accept idiots. Just like, no, we're just not going to accept your application. You're from Britain, go. Because we worry that they're stupid. Like, please don't blame us. No, honestly, I just...
It's fantastic. But, you know, the subject of Brexit also nicely feeds into concerns regarding COVID. And the UK per capita now has the highest death rate in the world.
That's insane, right?
It's insane. But it goes to show that you idiots listen to Boris Johnson, and he's proving himself to be more incompetent than Donald Trump. And that takes some doing.
Oh my gosh. No, I mean, in fairness, what you're saying is very true. Like, I find it horrifying. We've got family there. We have friends there. We know people who've lost loved ones in the UK. I have friends who've lost their brothers, sisters, fathers, husbands. You know, there is no one, like, there really is. It's beginning to touch everyone in a real way. And yet still what I find horrifying is that we get messages from family members in the UK asking us, like, is this information true? I've been sent this by some crazy person. Like, I don't understand. What is going on here? And they're still propagating lies and falsehoods, and they're still buying into these narratives, even though everyone knows someone who's died. Everyone. There's no exemptions anymore. There's no, like, I'm in a little enclave. I know absolutely no one who's been touched by COVID. Somebody's had it. Somebody's died from it. Come on now.
The insane thing is how many people, you know, are polling when they do the polls are saying that Johnson is doing a good job, or, you know. And the insane thing is that he had the audacity to come out on national TV and say that he and the government had done the best that they could.
No, look, okay, so let me just make a confession. Because let me make a confession. So I was in the UK the weekend, the Monday they locked, I think it was a Monday or the Sunday, they locked the country down, and we were there like a couple of days before. And he came out and he came onto the national television, and I will never forget it. My friends and I were sitting in the hotel room. We turned on the news to just watch what was happening, because we had to get back on the train and get back to our own country. So we were like there on a Thursday, I think it was Thursday, Friday, lockdown like a couple of days later. And he came out onto the news and he's like, you know, it's okay, we can be strong, we have, you know, stiff British upper lip, we can do this. I mean, some of us will die. I'm sorry that some of you are going to lose your grandparents. And he was so bumbling and insensitive. And I mean, he told the truth. People were going to die. He didn't lie. And all this time later, he's not lied. Parts of your population have just died off.
Yeah.
And he's sorry, but they had to die. I'm sorry. So he's already set the tone.
Here's the thing. People were always going to die from this, right? What he didn't say in that interview was, I'm going to kill them. Because in essence, that's what he did. You know, and let's be real here. Anybody that says that Johnson did the best he could, I just want to check you all on this, right?
Okay, go on.
The Chris Whitty, head of health over there in the UK, came out and they were saying, don't shake hands, you know, social distance. Boris Johnson goes on a interview later that day and says, oh, I'm shaking hands with everyone. I just shook hands the other day. They say, go into lockdown, right? Isolate. You cannot see your family. Boris Johnson has a baby. A couple of days later, Boris Johnson's dad is on TV talking about, yeah, I've already been to see my new grandson.
Might be the only one he knows, so he went to go find it.
Well, that's very true too. You know, I guess in some ways we have to give Boris credit for actually taking ownership and responsibility for a child.
Right? You know? Let's all just have a moment of silence and honor that. Come on now.
Yes.
He did.
And on the other hand, I giveth the compliment, I have to take it away. Yeah, how are you going to be telling people isolate? In which world is that responsible leadership? How can you conceivably say to people, I did the best I could, when you are not even following your own guidelines?
Yeah. Yeah, I find it really, as I say, we've got family there, we've got friends there, you know, that's our, not yours, but this is where I grew up, it's where I lived my whole life before I started traveling and moving. And it is so painful to see the place that you call home ripped apart by bigotry, by hatred of other, by just really false, crappy stories and lies, and there's nothing you can say or do that's going to counter that. People who wanted their borders, we want control of our borders. From whom do you want control? When you look at net European migration, from whom are you wanting? As much Europeans came is as much British people went. Like, what is the issue here? What is we need control? And Europe then showed them, like 20 minutes after y'all left, this is how you control your borders. We're shutting you out. You know, you've always had control. You were always sovereign. Where is what are you talking about? Where is this? We don't even get to control our own laws. Why do you think the House of Lords exists? Why do you think you have these lawmakers who sit and go painstakingly? Why do you think when you go to Europe, the rules are not the same in every single European country as they are at home? Let's pause there for a minute. You all know this in reality, but you've bought into this narrative that other people are the problem. Well, and what it angers me is it's a divide and conquer mentality, because what you're actually doing is pitting poor people against poor people. Yeah. That's what you're doing. The rich stay rich and have gotten rich over this period, but poor people, we go fight it out to the death, and let's see. It's very gladiatorial.
But I think there's also something interesting that I think is going to happen.
Okay.
And that is that for decades now, the UK, the consecutive governments of the UK have demonized Europe. Right? Britain is no longer part of Europe.
So who are going to demonize next?
I think you're going to see Europe begin to demonize Britain. And you already see that, you already see that in the whole COVID vaccination debacle, right? So
we saw this when they were like, you have a British variant that you don't have under control. You can't come to our borders. We're shutting you all out.
But it's not just that. It's also the trade with the vaccine and then wanting to blockade. It's Britain buying too much vaccine and not. You're going to see Europe and European countries start to do to Britain what Britain has been doing to Europe for decades.
And in some ways, I think, the sad thing is the only people that suffer in this is going to be poor people. That's the only people that ever suffer.
Yeah.
And when will poor people learn that poor people have more in common with each other than they do with the rich elite? I say that specifically to poor white people.
They won't.
because I think that's, for me, that's one of the travesties that we're having in all these conversations. Something remains the same. Poor people are at the brunt of this. If you have a rich millionaire, Elon Musk, you have all these rich billionaire peoples, the people that are paying the price for their billions is the people who don't even get paid a living wage underneath them, who they're, mining minerals in Africa and getting children to die in mines to get this mineral so that they can make mobile phones or technology or what have you. They're not paying those people. They're not paying those families. They're certainly not reimbursing the families who lose children in these places. They don't care. They're not bothered by this. When we talk about the capital of the USA, where we're talking about, a particular set of people stormed the Capitol, he didn't care. He got on a jet and jetted off to his luxury blah blah blah. He didn't care that the poor people were getting arrested, that they were getting, corralled and treated badly. He's not bothered by that. He's not bothered that they have not received a living wage, that they have not received health care. He doesn't care. When you look at Brexit, the rich people are not bothered. Oh, we're going to promise you billions. How much was the billions on the bus for the NHS? Where's your money? Show me the money. You left now. Show me the money for the NHS. Show me it. Just, do you know what I mean? The only people suffering are the poor people. But somehow poor people are pitted against each other by race, and we keep buying into it.
Right.
One particular race.
Earlier in the conversation, I mentioned about it's difficult to separate the conversation of race from wealth and class. And I think this is one of the things that white people really need to understand about the history of racism. And that is, in the beginning, people understood that this was a class issue. So, for example, white working class people in London understood they had more in common with the black slave than they did the people trying to catch them. So quite often what you would find in London was that before slavery was outlawed in Britain, that poor working class white people would be hiding and giving shelter to runaway slaves.
Right.
Because they understood we have more in common.
Right.
But what happened is with race and racism, and this is why I say to you, the cause of Brexit and Trump in the US and all of these right-wing movements throughout the world is because this is what happens when your hate of other is greater than your love of self. You will do things to harm yourself.
Oh, no.
Just in order to hurt someone else.
Oh, no. Speak on it.
Right? And I think this is one of the biggest things that white people do not understand about racism, is that when you perpetuate the system of racism, you are only hurting yourself. So, for example, it's well known that black people are paid less than white people.
Yeah.
Well, guess what happens when you pay a black person less? You look at the white person and you say, well, you know what? I'm only paying him $7.50 an hour. I'll give you $8 an hour. I'll give you $8.50 an hour. When actually the fair wage is $20 an hour.
But because you're paid $1 more than him, you're feeling pleased with yourself.
$1 more.
I'm feeling happy. I'm being fleeced. I'm being treated badly. I can't pay my rent properly. I don't have enough to eat. I can't make health payments. I can't do whatever I need to do. I'm struggling. I've got to go food bank. But you know what? At least I'm paid more than him. Right? What is wrong with us as humans?
And
honestly,
you see this with Brexit, right? You see this with Brexit where they would have Polish workers come across. They pay them less, and then the British workers will get just a little bit more, and then they'd be like, "Well, I'm getting paid more." No, y'all should be saying the fair wage for everybody is £15 an hour, £20 an hour.
Right.
We're not doing this until we all get the wage.
Right. Right. And I think that's the sad thing. They talk about the kind of historical context of, say, the civil rights movements in both the US and the UK and in Europe. where you see that once the laws began to change surrounding race, they then came on board for gender, they then came on board for religion, they came on board for disability. You saw that everybody benefited. Once you kind of pushed one, all the other laws started to follow. All of the other groups started to get more protections. It helped them, I think. But what you don't see is the, I can't say this word, reciprocity. What's that word now?
Yeah,
you don't see. Did I say it right? Wow, look at me. It's late, I'm tired, and I can still speak English. Woo-hoo! I think that's, for me, that's one of the, it's such a downside to the work that we do. I mean, we both are involved in work of education around race, gender, and those sorts of issues of disparity. And one of the biggest challenges that I think we face is people not realizing how interlinked all these things are. And if you let one go, particularly if you just keep letting race off the hook as a conversation, but you concentrate only on your thing, what you've basically done is you've eliminated everybody from the conversation. You're only concentrating on your thing for you, not for everyone. Because you're not the only disabled person. You're not the only person with a gender or sexuality difference. You're not the only person or the only group with women. You're not the only group. There are others in your category that are brown and black people. What is the issue? For all. It should always be for all. But because we let go of the race conversation and people don't want to have that, and they want to say it's in the past or it's forgotten. But we see direct links in 1 month. We're just talking about January. And how many stories have linked back, and we've had to go, race, race, oh, race. So if you dealt with this one conversation, you could change the world. You could make such a difference. You could begin to undo some of the harm that's happening. You could have fair wages. You might actually have a fair wage. You might actually get some of these things that you need in your life. I don't know. I get very passionate about everything, so I'm told I need to watch my breathing and calm down, but I feel quite passionately that people aren't following the line of thought. If I want rights, then everyone has to have rights. Like, I can't just be like, those people don't get rights because I don't like them.
Well, you have to understand that when only one or a particular group or subset of people get what you are calling a right, it's not a right, it's a privilege.
Right.
Right is something that is inalienable to all. And I think this is what we need to be painfully aware of and mindful of. And this is something that Christians need to be aware of, because they have so many issues with sexuality and all of these things. That the right to life and the right to choose freely is a right. You cannot take away somebody's choice if you say it is a right.
Right.
If you're attempting to do that, what you're saying is, I want it to be my privilege.
Yeah.
I want it to be my privilege to be able to do these things.
Yeah. And I think these are hard things that we wrestle with, but I think in the end, it really does come down as simply as that. And I mean, if anything, January has taught me that we haven't learned any lessons. We have learned nothing in this corona period. Like, it feels like there are some people who are obviously learning and growing, and we're trying our best and we're doing the good stuff. But there is a proportion of society who have decided that learning any kind of lesson out of this period of time is not up for debate. They're just going to continue the cycle of blame, of scapegoating, of ignoring things that bring about a better society. So even down to every country, I'm sure, is untouched by this issue. Corona, of course, is everywhere. It's a world pandemic. We're all having to be mindful of others. It's costing every one of us something. Like, it's costing us time, it's costing us jobs, it's costing us sanity with our children. It's costing. It takes energy. Everything is harder work. Nobody is exempt from struggling except for very rich people, of course, who live in a different planet to the rest of us. You're a billionaire. separate planet, but we're all struggling. But what I'm remarkably shocked at some days is that I learned something really critical, which is that you should not make people sick. You have flu or a cold, keep it to yourself. You don't know other people's health conditions. You don't know what other people are struggling with in their families. Don't make them sick. Keep your sickness to yourself. You don't know. How come no one else got that message?
I think this touches on another issue that happened throughout January. A few months back, we did a dark side of vaccinations.
Okay.
And we have questions over vaccinations, or not vaccinations in per se, but in particular the COVID-19 vaccination in terms of long-term effects being unknown. And there are quite a few medical health professionals out there that have questions over it. Now, some of them are crazy. They're certifiably crazy, I'm sure of that.
Just put that aside.
Others not so much. Others are, like us, simply, we haven't studied it long enough to know long-term effects. We know historically that we have put out vaccines quickly and found that they have unforeseen effects long-term.
Yeah. Okay. And in that episode, we gave a number of vaccines that had been put out quickly. The last one, of course, being the swine flu vaccine.
One of the ones for swine flu.
Yeah, the ones for swine flu, and that had to be withdrawn from the market. And the side effects sounded horrific, to be honest. I mean, it sounds like, oh, you've got narcolepsy, oh, you sleep, but that just sounded. I mean, reading the horror stories,
it's debilitating for people that have it.
Reading those stories were awful.
But what I was going to say was, in terms of what you were saying about not making others sick, and also what I was saying about the choice, the freedom of people to choose, is that you have stories in the USA, and I believe there was one in the UK that I know of people destroying the vaccinations, willfully destroying the vaccinations.
I'm sorry, why? What? What's it? What is wrong with people?
Because they're on a whole conspiracy trip.
Yeah, but so let me just, Mr. Storm, can we just pause here for a minute? Can we just acknowledge something? There is something wrong with humans. No, seriously. I mean, just because I don't want it, why would I destroy it for everyone? Like, what? So you think a chip is in it? Let's say, because the conspiracy theory is a chip is in it. You're going to chip yourself. What's that got to do with you? Like, what does it? What's the issue? Why are you destroying it?
Thing. People have to be free to choose. There are going to be consequences to this. You know, whether you choose to have one or not, there are going to be consequences. But
I'm exhausted. Like, that's just tiring.
So when you're talking about willfully making people sick, you're possibly killing people by denying them the vaccination. And that should be someone's choice to make. I want the vaccination or I don't want the vaccination. And I think, governments have to do a better job if they want people to take it, of actually communicating effectively around the vaccination and answering people's legitimate questions, not crazy microchip questions.
No, just let's.
But what will happen if there are unforeseen long-term effects? Will there be compensation? Do you have a fund put aside to help pay for any long-term effects or adverse effects that people might have and suffer from this? Yeah. What if something is and they need long-term healthcare for the rest of life? Do you have funds set aside for this? Because you have exempted companies from financial responsibility. So the onus is on the government to pay these things.
Right.
And so these are the questions that need to be asked surrounding this. These are legitimate concerns.
And I think the fact that what tends to happen is that you brush it all into, those people are just crazy. So you don't feel safe or confident off a green part of society. Like my kids are I'm vaccinated, kids are vaccinated. Like, we have vaccines. That's not the issue. The issue is not the vaccines. My issue is not against vaccines. My issue is on how each vaccine is delivered, what the effects of each vaccine is. For example, here's another vaccine for you, which we found out in January is new. So the one for girls were getting for the teenage girls
MMR.
were getting it. No, not MMR. Precisely that vaccine for cervical cancer. It's for the thing that what is it called now?
Yeah.
Okay, so that vaccine is now going to be given to boys.
Boys, yeah.
And so, but I got questions. I wasn't even thinking about that vaccine because it was only being given to girls to prevent girls from getting, cervical cancer, developing issues with this vaccine. But now it's going to be given to boys. What were your testing periods? You want to give it to a teenage boy. I get that. And your reasoning is preventative. Not that it does anything to the boy, but that the boy has a responsibility not to damage the girl, which I fully agree with. Like, if it's not going to harm you, then what's the deal? Like, just take the vaccine. Like, what's the issue? But I have questions. So I have to now go and research another vaccine because I'm like, so these are questions that are normal, healthy questions. When you're being asked to inject something into your body, when you're being asked to undertake a procedure, and we have something here in the Netherlands, which is great. The care is cooperative. So it's you in partnership with your doctor decide what you're doing. And your doctor doesn't tell you what to do. They ask and they present options and you get to pick.
Well, so to be fair, in the US, your doctor doesn't tell you what to do either because you can't afford to see him to tell you what to do.
Different issue, babe. Different issue. We can see our doctors here. We get to see our GPs. I get to see my GP. Very lovely man. Like my GP very much. Great GP. House arts, they call him here. Lovely. Can't say anything bad about him. But what I do think is that why is it that I'm allowed to have those conversations with him about any other treatment I would undergo, but when it comes to this vaccine, no, don't ask any questions. No, just take the vaccine. Like, hold on. Like, I don't believe there's a microchip in there. Like, who cares? I mean, who would care about me that much to stick a microchip in me other than my husband, who probably wants to track me if I get sick? And even then, I don't think he would track me. Although he has talked about putting surveillance cameras in to watch to make sure I'm all right. But I fall over a lot, don't worry.
No, that's just more because I want to be in another part of the house. So
you just want to make sure I'm in that part of the house away from you. Just close the door.
Where you go, I don't care. That's your business.
But yeah, why do we think we're so important that they want to put microchips on us? Beyond me. There's a self-importance issue there. But I'm not of that.
I know I'm worth it.
Of course you are, darling. Of course you are. But I think it's just sad that you don't get to ask questions. You don't get to have intelligent conversation. What you get is, we even have doctors who are very close to us who just are like, no, it's fine. And you're like, no, but can we have a discussion about long-term side effects? Can we have a discussion? They're like, no. And you're like, really? We're all of the no. Like, there's no one wanting to have these questions. Like, yeah, painful. But we got to an hour and 8 minutes.
Okay.
So we're doing quite well for time.
Mm-hmm.
Did we cover enough dark side stuff of January? How long is your list?
Listen, I've got things. You haven't given any topics. Is there anything you wish to discuss?
No, I was relying on your list. We're one after all.
Well, there's the fact that Julian Assange, the whole Julian Assange debacle.
Oh, okay. All right, never mind. Let's talk about Myanmar then.
Okay.
Let's bypass Julian Assange. I can't deal with that nonsense. I really can't. It just, go on. Tell me what happened with Julian Assange in January.
Well, I was going to say...
Listen, he was... What? Okay, now hold on.
Extradition was denied.
Extradition was denied, but not for the reason that you would expect. It was denied because the health standards, safety standards, and something else of an American jail system is not up to par.
They couldn't guarantee his safety and well-being in a U.S. prison. And it wasn't conducive to his mental health.
But Americans are in those same prisons.
Health system.
Oh my God! If you had a decent prison system that wasn't privatized.
Well, actually, I think there was a bill introduced, or there's a bill that's going to be introduced into the U.S. Congress to ban federal prisons, or I can't remember if it was an executive order that Biden's meant to sign.
Okay, we definitely can do that another day, because I read something slightly different on that one, which was from some activists who were talking about the fact that Biden signed or put into motion this idea that prisons all had to return to the public system. That was what the headline said. But when you unpacked it, it didn't actually do what it said on the label. So yeah, let's not jump too quickly in defense of that one, because I think there's some work to be done to unpack whether that's actually true and whether that will happen or not. So that's a different one. But what I think is ironic about that is extradition wasn't denied because of, legal frameworks of, whether the law was on your side or not on your side, whether you were guilty or not guilty, whether you could be extradited or not. Your safety and well-being would not survive an American jail system. But there are Americans, thousands and thousands and thousands of Americans in that same jail system.
Who's in that system?
USA citizens. USA citizens. Well, I say citizens. I don't know that all of them are they?
Most
residents of the USA.
Let's
put it like that. Residents of the USA. So thousands. So you couldn't guarantee this man's. You thought that system was not conducive to this one human over here. But nobody thinks to challenge the USA government. No other country is challenging the USA government on the legal framework on which their prison system for the USA is run, that it's inhumane.
Well, I think it's funny that Mexico offered him asylum.
I'm laughing because the relationship between Mexico and the USA under 45 it's as if they did it just to spite him. We'll offer you asylum. Why not? Come live down here.
Yeah, as I said, it's
insane.
As I said, I think it's just crazy.
It's insane. It is insane.
So yeah, but you wanted to talk about Myanmar.
Well, I think that we spend a lot of time talking about Western news, and right towards the end of January, there were a couple of news stories out of Asia that were really troubling, really, really disturbing, really sad. I mean, just sad. Like we know people who are from Myanmar that were really devastated. They woke up in the morning absolutely shocked and devastated that their country went back to a state occupation. Like the police, the armed forces took over and just threw everybody in jail. They were watching live on TV as families were being ripped apart, because he's a government official, and the children were being carried off in another direction. And it was shocking in that I think they've been through all this pain already, and I guess they thought they were on the outside of that. They thought that, okay, there's atrocities here, there are bad things that happen, and of course, I can never say her name, which is really bad. The leader, the former leader. Thank you. She has not got a perfect record. She doesn't have a perfect record. She's not exemplary in her leadership. There are questions about what happened to certain groups under her leadership.
I don't think there's any real questions about it.
Well, we get to say there are questions about 45's people under 45's leadership, so I get to say there are questions here.
Who says there's questions? I don't give leeway for questions under 45 and his people.
Western minds say these things. So in Western countries, we say, there's questions about what happened under the leadership of 45. I mean, we question whether, was it a white nationalist supremacist groups? Did they really storm the So, I can say questions. I mean, I think that there is evidence both ways. So I'm not saying that, but, I can only imagine I'm going through Brexit. So I can imagine looking back at your home country and just feeling like the rug's been ripped out from underneath you, worrying about the safety of your family. You know, banks were being called back to closed effectively. People weren't sure whether they'd be able to get their own money. There were real question marks over whether people would get paid. And because people live on that poverty line, they're not living wealthily, they're living on that poverty line. If you don't get paid, you don't eat. And that spirals that country, which is already under pressure, which is already going through difficult times, into an even more volatile political situation, and brings up all of those, you know, horrible feelings and you know, past that they've had. And I think it was met with like a footnote of the month. And here it is on one news line, and back to the Western countries, of course, and what we're doing, which I guess in some ways is understandable because we live in the West and we talk about the West an awful lot. And at the same time, I felt really, I don't know, it really affected me to read it. And I can't put my finger on why. It really bugged me.
Yeah.
Maybe because it sounded like what happened on the 6th, but it actually succeeded.
Perhaps another time we'll talk about the 6th in more detail, because I don't think people realize just how close the USA was close to
what
ending.
Happened to Myanmar.
Right. But what I will say is this, that the Myanmar one is an interesting one for me, because did they really have a coup, a military coup there, or was the facade just ripped off? And by that I mean, when Aung San Suu Kyi was challenged over the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya, she blamed elements of the military and said, I cannot control them.
Yeah.
Well, if you couldn't control them, you're not in control of the country.
No.
So that leads to the question of, if she's telling the truth, then she was never in control.
Yeah.
And if she was being dishonest, then she is complicit in
the Rohingya situation,
the genocide of the Rohingya. You know, and so for me, you know, that is a question. So that is why the events sit uneasily for me, because there's a lot of unanswered questions. Yes, there's tragedy. You know, people are going to suffer. The economy is going to take a hit. You know, you name it. You know, families are being split up. And to be honest, I expect that a lot of people have probably been executed by now. You know.
Well, this was the sad thing, wasn't it? It was seeing your public officials and your policymakers and people being arrested, taken into captivity. Nobody knows where they were taken. You were seeing children being ripped from parents, taken away. You don't know, because the state closed the media outlets down. They closed the banks down. They closed any powerhouse down, so that information, of course, is choked. And so the people are left frightened. You know, Myanmar citizens around the world were frightened, quite frankly, because your family are there, and how are they alive? How many people were executed? How are they maintaining power? What controls have they taken in order to keep power? And I think that that's just scary. And what's scary is, you know, the USA now is 46, of course, not 45 anymore. Exciting. So 46 is going to make a statement, and 46 calls the country Burma, not Myanmar. So there's a whole issue there. He says this is what happens, and blames kind of 45 for the issues of not being on the world stage in a correct way. This is why we're seeing these issues in Myanmar. Okay, well, really? I mean, it was just political gesturing. It wasn't even, I mean, there's a lot we can blame 45 for. I'm not saying that. But I mean, this was America at its finest. We are that white hope, you know, who's coming to the rescue and in control, and we set the tone for the world, and you wouldn't dare do that while we were in our full power. But, you know, once we let this idiot loose for a while, then I'm sorry, but we're back now. We're going to be the knight in shining armor, and we're just going to go bulldozing through another person's country. To me, it was scary to hear that. It was scary to hear that rhetoric again in some ways, because that's rhetoric that I had become accustomed in the last 4 years to not hearing, because they weren't setting the tone for anything. They were not deciding anything. And quite frankly, we're all a little better off for it. So, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what about it hit me, but it really did kind of feel like the blow to the end of the month. Like it really was. Yeah, it was not good, and which led to another story, which was in China.
Well, just before you go there, I just want to touch on what you were saying about the US. And this is Myanmar's biggest downfall. They don't have a huge wealth of oil.
Oh.
Right? If they had oil,
USA would have been in like a knight in shining armor.
And European countries would have been in there in a heartbeat. Right?
Yeah.
So I think we need to just be mindful of the fact that had it been another country that was rich in oil or gas, I think Myanmar does have a little bit of oil, but not much, that the US would have been involved. Syria is rich in oil and gas. US got involved in the mess there. European nations got involved in the mess there. Name any country which is having conflict in the world that is rich in oil or gas that the US or European nations are not interfering in when there is political instability. And if Aung San Suu Kyi is telling the truth when she gave the interview and said about the Rohingya that she wasn't in control of the army, I guarantee you the US and other nations would have sent in support, military support, to protect the oil and gas reserves.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. That's scary and frightening, but true.
Yeah, there's no interest and there is no value to the US or European nations to get involved in Myanmar, because I believe their greatest exports are precious stones. So it's not even like they export gold or silver as major exports. It's precious stones, because gold is a valuable conductor. Silver is like, the price of silver has gone through the roof because it's like the most used conductor in electronics today. So, they don't have those resources that Western nations want. So you know what? You'll kill each other. We'll see what's left in the scraps, and we'll deal with that afterwards.
Which is not the situation for this other Asian nation.
No.
Who's been in the news with the Uyghurs. Uyghurs, am I saying that correctly?
Uyghurs, I think it's pronounced.
Uyghurs, which is the Muslim community in China. That came up again. It comes up periodically as far as I can tell, every 6 months there's another huge story, another breakthrough, another outing, another investigative journalistic piece, another investigation from a government that reveals that there is a group of people by nearly the millions, I think we're at now, who are being rounded up, put into effectively what sounds to me very much like concentration camps, and radically being what China says is they're being re-educated into Chinese society. I nearly slipped and said someone else's society. They're being re-educated into Chinese society. That's the line that we're being fed. They're being liberated from the Islamic ways and put into the Chinese military, the Chinese system. What it sounds like every single time that we have a UN investigation and in journalistic investigation, any kind of information that comes out of China from any source, any first-hand accounts, any second-hand accounts, any accounts at all that come out, is that these people are being brutally exterminated. I don't know another word. They're being brutally treated. I mean, they talk about the women all being taken to one camp, reassigned to new husbands after they've been raped and tortured, children being brainwashed in what looks like, what they call it, kindergartens. That's what they call it. These mass camps where like 100,000 children are living with no parents. And what the government is saying is, they lost their parents. 100,000 children lost their parents, and then the stories of parents whose children have been ripped from them. They went to visit family across the border, or what have you, because it's a border where the majority of them come from. Seems to be a border town with Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, is that the correct country?
Maybe.
And when they go to see family, they're not returning. The next thing, I mean, this one gentleman's story just haunted me, because his wife and son went across the border to see some family, never returned. He was watching the news and saw his child in a Chinese daycare, speaking Mandarin, speaking the language, different name, but saw his child, and there was nothing he could do. He's not getting his child back, but he could see his child had been taken and re-educated, and everything had been ripped from him, because of course they don't speak the national language, they speak the language of their region. And it's shocking, because it feels like no one's doing anything, even though every 6 months these stories come out. If I look back on the news, if you just put Chinese and Muslim in the search engines, every 6 months you'll see a story that comes up on your timeline of this investigative journalism, investigations done by other governments, investigations done by the UN, news story after news story breaking that this is what's happening to these people. And I'm like, what we doing? Power. Nothing. So for me, I think it just really set the tone for, it's going to be a rough year. This year's not going to be easy. January's been hard. There's been a lot to say in the West, but it's not faring much better anywhere else.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that you have is that China is a superpower, and that they sit on they're a permanent member of the UN Security Council, which means they have veto rights. So even if you try to bring anything against them in UN, they'll just veto it.
Yep.
Which for me is problematic, because I'm like, how are you able to veto an action against you? You shouldn't be involved in that.
But surely that should be like, so okay, let's take it down to a micro level. If I'm on a church committee, let's just, I'm a pastor, if I'm on a church committee and they mention like they're nominating something, or they want to bring an action against somebody or for somebody or what have you, the person who the action is about has to step out of the room while the committee decide, and then they can ask questions afterwards. You don't get to change the direction of the conversation. You don't get to say in the conversation, like, no, can't talk about me, I'm sorry, we're not doing that today. Next subject. Or no, you can't hold me accountable. The rule is that you step outside of the room, we have the conversation, we decide some things, we have maybe come up with a question list, whatever, and then you can come back in the room and then we ask you the questions, and you can ask questions, but you don't have a right to veto. So how is it enshrined in any kind of ruling that a country who sits on the Security Council of the UN gets a veto right on their own country? Surely.
But it's that, but it's more than that. As I said, there are 5 permanent members, and any one of those 5 can veto a resolution. It doesn't matter if every single other country in the world voted in favor.
That's too much power for any country to hold. We're not nice as humans.
But that's why the UN is a lame duck.
We should do the dark side of the UN. We should. I need to do some research.
Yep.
I need to read.
But I'm up for it. But that's the UN. You've got those 5 sitting on there, and any one of them can veto. I believe it's the US, UK, France, Russia, and China, I think, are the 5.
And who died and made them all kings? Like, what on earth? Why do they get to say that?
I think they were the original members, or the original some of the original founding members. And
okay,
of course,
so it's this is really interesting. So it's China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, and the United States.
Yeah, that's what I said.
But they're all countries. So forgive me, but aren't these all countries with terrible atrocities in their own countries?
Yeah.
They don't treat their people very particularly nicely.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these countries have terrible laws, like in their legal framework.
Well, I mean, you say that, that's true. But for me, I just look at it and I think, these are some of the countries with the greatest appetite for empire that the world has ever known.
So surely that's something that should be revoked, right? Like they should just, we've hit on a nail here that I didn't really think about or know about or really had done a lot of reading on. I'm not up on my UN stuff. I only know like little bits of UN history. I'm not as up on it as I would. Look, we could be here all night now. I've opened that can of worms, so I don't know about you, but I think maybe it's time to close.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. So what have we learned in January? TC Storm, what have we learned in January?
It's been one jacked up month.
Oh man. Roll on the love month. No, not feeling amorous towards me.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's a love month. It's February. It's like love month, right? On that note, people, we have loved having you with us. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you so much for being with us, Pastor Tabitha and the Coming Storm. We are really looking forward to being with you Sunday evenings, 9 till 10. I promise to try my best to be on time. We will be on time next week. It's because I teach a Bible study class before, and I don't know how to do it any other way. I'm trying. But next week, no Bible study classes, every other Sunday. If you want Bible study class lessons, though, I'm your girl. Seriously, we do those too. But this is the Darkside with Pastor Tabitha and the Coming Storm. Thank you very much. Until next Sunday at 9 o'clock here on YouTube, Facebook, and all of your usual providers. Share, like, subscribe, do the thing.
Deuces.
Bye, hon. Deuces. That's what we're saying today. Deuces. See you later, people. Peace.